When I look at today's gospel, it's an interesting gospel. It's probably one of the more difficult ones to actually kind of wrap our head around of exactly what's going on here. Because I'll be honest, on a first read or on the surface, it looks like Jesus is kind of being a jerk to this woman, right? She comes to her and very simply says, "Hey, my daughter is sick. Can you heal her?" And then he kind of puts her through the ringer so much so that he ends up calling her a dog at one point. And I don't know about you, but when I read that, I'm kind of like, dude, you a little bit, you're a little bit too cold on this one, right? It might be a little bit too forceful, a little bit too much. I think it's really important for us, though, to understand this gospel. We got to understand a little bit of context around the conversation, and particularly who is speaking. When we hear that the woman is from they were in the district of Tyre and Sidon. And this is a Canaanite woman. There's a key to reading today's gospel. Because the Canaanite people and the Jewish people don't get along. There's this massive cultural, historical rivalry and dislike between Canaanites and Jews. And there's an ongoing battle and an ongoing kind of disagreement and this ongoing hatred that shows itself repeatedly through the Old Testament over and over and over again. So when we hear that this woman is a Canaanite woman that's approaching Jesus and his apostles, she could be approaching for a bunch of different reasons. She could be approaching to try and disprove Jesus. She could be approaching trying to kind of one-up Jesus. She could be approaching to do violence to the apostles. There could be plenty of reasons why this woman would be approaching. So when we hear today's gospel and we hear this back and forth, it's really important for us to recognize that this is a Canaanite woman that's coming to him. You can actually see it as it kind of breaks down because she just starts talking and talking and begging and begging. And she keeps going and keeps kind of following. We hear reported that there's 3 different times that she asked Jesus, "Can you heal my daughter?" And as this goes on, we can kind of hear it get a little bit more and a little bit more personal. Because the first time she says it, even the apostles say, like, look, send her away. She's bothering us. Send her away. Like they're saying, this woman is aggravating. She's just chirping and asking, da-da-da-da. Like we have nothing to do. We don't want anything to do with this Canaanite woman. A Jewish rabbi and a Canaanite would have had no kind of dealings. And Jesus is a Jewish rabbi. He's a teacher. He's going around place to place. He's teaching. Now, she knows about the miracles, I'm sure, at this point. She knows that he's got a reputation. I'm sure there's plenty of word going around Jerusalem and around the area that there is this prophet, there is this rabbi, there is this kind of miracle worker that can do certain things. He's made the lame walk. He's made people blind that can see. He's done all these things, so maybe he can heal my daughter. And that's what's motivating her to go to Jesus. Then she comes to Jesus and she says, "Lord, help me." Important word, Lord. Because there's a recognition of his authority. There's a recognition of his identity. So some scripture scholars say at this point what Jesus is doing, he's testing her. Where whenever he says this money line about the dog, we don't take the part for the children and throw it to the dogs, that what he's actually doing is he's testing her there. And she passes the test. Because then she calls Jesus Master. And again, she puts herself subservient to him. And ultimately, we hear it's happily ever after her daughter is healed. I've always been struck by, though, the fact that Jesus calls her a dog. Growing up, I'll be completely honest, I always wanted dogs. I always wished that I could have a dog. My mom is deathly afraid of dogs. It's like a thing from like her childhood. So when my sister's 6 years older than me, she moves out. First thing she did when she got her own house, got a dog. Now she has 2. First thing I did whenever I got my own rectory, got a dog. We don't know if that's because we were deprived of dogs as kids or because we were trying to keep our mom out of our house, but it's one or both of those things. But I remember when I first got my dog, it was like I had to learn how to take care of a dog, right? And what I learned very quickly is whenever they're running around the house, if things get quiet, go find them. Because there's something wrong going on. There's going to be a mess around a corner. There's going to be a cushion is going to get torn up. Something that's important is going to get torn up. A shoe is going to be somewhere. Like something's going to happen. Well, I remember in my old rectory, my old house, when I was at my previous parish, a lot of times what I would do is I would go sit outside in the backyard and I would work on my stuff, whether it was phone calls or my emails or whatever like that. A lot of times I'd go sit in the backyard and I would just let the dog kind of run around. And what I noticed, it was one day I was doing this, and I just kind of started to watch him go about and do his thing. And what I noticed is that I'm not too far from being a dog. That's not supposed to be funny. Leave me alone. Anyway. But honestly, the step from that dog to me is a lot closer than the step from me to God. When we would walk outside, he would be right on my hip. And the second I would sit down, whatever my chair was, I would sit down and start working, he would aggravate the ever-living out of me. Be right up on my legs, right up like going, like licking me, whatever, like play, come on, do something, like come on. And I'd just be like, yeah, pet him. And he's like, now he's starting to bite at my hand or whatever, but like he's just trying to play. Because we're outside, that's what we're supposed to do is play. And then I would get locked in on my other stuff. And then one day I was watching him after he kind of like gave up on me. And there were three typical things that he would do. The first thing he would do is that he would notice up, we had a tree and there were some birds that were up in the tree. So what he would do is he would just kind of lock in on the birds. And when a bird would fly away, I would see him. He would run. And then he would go right up to the fence and he would watch the bird fly away. And then if a bird came back, he would catch it and he would follow it all the way back to the tree. So he'd be fascinated with these birds that he would never be able to catch. The second thing that he would do is after he would kind of give up on the birds or if they weren't flying around that day for whatever reason, then what he would do is he would just start sniffing around and he would be all up in the dirt, all up in the flowers, all up in whatever. And he's just digging around. He's looking for a smell. And then when he found the smell, he would just start digging in the ground. He would start eating dirt. He would start eating the grass. Probably should have fed him. Oh, well, I'm a terrible owner. But anyway, like I was working, I wasn't paying attention. But he just like be all up in the dirt, all up in the dirt. Consumed with whatever it was and just eating dirt. And then whenever that didn't work, if that started to get boring, then was the real fun one was he would go back to his own crap. His dried poop in the yard, right? He would go and sniff it. I don't know if he was smelling food. I don't know if he was smelling whatever. But then what would have happened is he would find one of those little landmines and he would eat it. Then I would tell him to go and just enjoy and go play with the associate pastor and let him lick him a little bit. Anyway. But it was interesting because whenever I'm watching this and I'm seeing this go on, I'm sitting there and I'm going, I kind of associate with the dog, not because of the last one. Anyway. But I see where he's coming from. I say that when we feel like, let's say, you at some point have had a good experience of God. Might have been through a retreat, might have been through a sacrament, might have been through your baptism, it might have been like later in life, it might have been through just a good community Bible study, wherever you're coming from, like you might have had some kind of a good experience of God. And whenever you go to pray, you are trying your best and your hardest to get God's attention. And you don't feel anything in return. I don't know about you, I have that happen regularly. At some point in your life, you might have had some kind of a positive experience of God. Like at some point in your life, you and God are on the same wavelength. You're in the same place. You know God is real. You know God, He is working. You know that He is here. You know that He is continuing to speak to you. And yet, when you go to pray, you do everything you're supposed to. You show up. You're like aware. You have coffee. You have whatever you need. You have your Bible, your journal, everything. You sit down to pray, and nothing. And you beg Him. And you beg Him, and you beg Him, and nothing. Where do we go? Well, like a puppy in a backyard. First place we might go is just birds that we'll never be able to catch. What does that look like? We might start daydreaming. We might start daydreaming and thinking about what we left behind, what was. Man, like whenever it feels like God is not there, when it feels like God doesn't care, God is not listening, God is not around, God doesn't want to associate with me, I'm speaking to like the empty space of the world. Like whenever I go to pray and I'm just speaking, and there's nothing in return, sometimes we can just start thinking about, man, it used to be a lot better. Man, I remember the community I used to have. I remember that relationship. I wonder if he is still with her. I wonder what she's doing now. We can start to fantasize about the past. Or we can start to look ahead. Man, one day, I'm going to be where I want to be. One day, I'm going to be good enough. One day, God will listen to me because of fill in the blank. One day, I'll be able to prove myself. One day, I'll be able to have the job I want, the money I want, the family I want, the perfect house, the perfect. What can happen is we can fantasize about all these things that are just passing and they're not real, so we can't catch them. The second thing the dog wastes his time with, right, is digging around in the dirt. And whenever we feel like God is not paying attention to us, when we feel like God might not be listening to us, when we feel like God might not care about us, what we can do is we can find ourselves just diving into worldly stuff. Whatever the new thing is in the world. Outrage porn that's online. The next thing that's going to get us fired up and angry, the next cause, the next thing, the next big thing and movement online, the next hashtag, the next whatever. We can just find ourselves doom scrolling through whatever it is on our feed, or we can find ourselves in a YouTube rabbit hole that just leads us to nothing. And 3 hours later, we've been scrolling between TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and we're wondering where time went. But we just immersed ourselves in a bunch of worldly stuff. We can become obsessive about worldly stuff. We can think that worldly stuff is what's going to fulfill, what's going to actually give us meaning, what's actually going to satisfy the ache that we have in our heart, and the reality is it won't. Like anybody else started looking at fantasy football rankings yet? Yeah, my boy in the back. Yep. Jamar Chase first pick, right? But it's true. We can find ourselves just immersed in things that really don't matter. Third one is we can go back to our own mistakes, our own mess, our favorite sin, and this time it's going to satisfy. Lustful relationship, pornography, gossip, turning in on ourselves. This time it's going to work. This time it's going to satisfy. This time it's going to feel good, taste good, be what it's supposed to be, but it doesn't satisfy. Whenever we don't feel like God is responding, when we don't feel like God is paying attention, when we don't feel like God is listening, we can very quickly start to act and sound like a dog. Fantasizing, earthly things, favorite sin. What does the woman today, though, teach us about this? The woman's not satisfied. She doesn't stay, she's not okay with being pushed away. She's not okay. Like any parent will tell you that they will go through hell and high water to make sure that a sick kid is healthy. And this woman shows us that she is persistent. And she shows us that she has faith and Jesus is who he says he is. And if Jesus is who he says he is, it doesn't matter how many times he looks at her and says, a dog. It doesn't matter how many times he says, no, get away from me. It doesn't matter how many times he says, I'm not here for you. It doesn't matter how many times he gives his whatever excuse. She goes to him and she says, no, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm coming to you, Lord. Because her faith is that strong. And she believes that Jesus is who he says he is. And if Jesus is who he says he is, then I'm going to push through and Lord, I'm coming to find you. Because faith is rooted in love, and love is a choice before it's anything else. I've shared this story before, but it fits. When I was, it was about the time I was graduating high school. My grandfather was in the hospital, and he was in ICU. He had been dealing with some health issues, obviously. My grandmother and my mom were in the ICU room with him. The nurse came in, and when the nurse came in, she looks at him and she's like, it's late, it's maybe like 9:30 or something. She's like, hey, visiting hours are over, I'm gonna have to ask y'all to leave. So my grandmother, being the sweet little lady she is, just looks at the nurse and says, is there any way that I could stay with my husband tonight? And the nurse is like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it's hospital policy, you have to leave. So my grandmother gets her stuff, she leans over, she gives my grandpa a kiss, and she walks out. As she walks out, my mom is like picking some other stuff up, throwing some stuff away, and she overhears this conversation. Nurse looks at my grandfather, who's in the bed, and says, you must really love her. And she says, yes. And he says, how long have y'all been married? And he said, like 56 years, whatever it was at that time. Knew it to the day, right? And she says, wow, that must have been very hard. And he paused for a second, he looked at her and said, nope, it's the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. And the nurse kind of was taken back by it, and she just kind of like looked at him, and you could see she was confused. And my grandpa says, because people think that love is a matter of the heart. It's not a matter of the heart, it's a matter of the will. People don't fall in and out of love. The will simply runs out. Love is a choice. Our faith is a choice. We choose to love. We choose, even when we don't feel love, we choose to love the person. 60 some odd years of marriage. It's not because they were always on great terms. That's not because they were always happy. That's not because they always felt like they were in love. That's because they chose to be in love. In the same way, with our relationship with God, we might not feel him. He might not seem like he's listening. He might not be one that we might not get all the fill up and all the goods and all the butterflies in our stomach or all the graces that we think we're getting. We might not get any of the feelings when we go to pray, but we still choose to pray nevertheless. We still choose to come to God nevertheless, because love is a choice before it's a feeling. When we come to Mass tonight, we're coming before a God who's already chosen you. We come before a God who's already revealing himself to you. We come before a God who goes before you in this school year, whether it's your first time in college, your last time in college, or anything in between. We come before a God who is waiting for you and desires you and loves you first. Catechism of the Catholic Church says it. God calls man first. Man may forget his Creator or hide far from his face. He may run after idols or accuse the deity of having abandoned him. I've been in all those spaces at some point. Yet, the living and true God tirelessly calls each person to that mysterious encounter known as prayer. God tirelessly calls out to you. God tirelessly calls out to me. God tirelessly is inviting us to himself. And in prayer, God's initiative of love always comes first. Our own first step is a response. I don't know why you came to Mass tonight. It might be because it's your first time back on campus and you're very excited because you know a bunch of people. It might be because you got a random phone call from a random person in the last 2 days and you're like, hey, you know what? I might as well give it a shot. It might be because you heard the priest is real funny and handsome. I'm sorry, Father Mitch isn't here anymore. If you know Father Mitch, that was a good one. Anyway. But however and why ever you're here, God has called you first. It's his movement, his spirit that invites us. As we come to the altar, as we come to Mass tonight, we respond to his initiative of love. Let us not lose our persistence in asking the Lord, in reaching out to the Lord, in making ourselves available to the Lord. St. Augustine says that when we go to pray, God doesn't change. We do. That when we go to pray, our capacity to receive opens up. That we can receive more of the Lord. May today, as we come to Mass, we be stretched. So whatever the Lord desires to give, we're ready to receive.